Yet another day of sheer destruction in Ukraine. Authorities say the country is at the crossroads and even residential buildings are not spared in this fierce battle. Russian armed forces claim to have taken full control of Kherson, south of Ukraine. The mayor of Kyiv has announced a 36-hour curfew is prohibited to move around the city without special permission except to go to bomb shelters. The US says warring parties should never ignore the power of diplomacy.
Our view continues to be that despite words that are said in these talks or coming out of these talks, diplomacy requires engaging in good faith to de-escalate. And what we're really looking for is evidence of that. And we're not seeing any evidence at this point that President Putin is doing anything to stop the onslaught or de-escalate. But that is really what we would be looking for.
While city officials in Mariupol say over 20,000 people have been killed during the Russian bombardment. The EU says another raft of sanctions have been tabled to punish Russia.
The fact is that the Russian economy is strongly affected. The level of trade is clearly diminished. So sanctions are operating. This doesn't mean, unfortunately, that they will change the course of the war tomorrow. So we will insist, we will stay united, but unfortunately we have also to support the Ukrainian people delivering arms to defend themselves because economic sanctions are not alone able to change the course of the war.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson hosted a meeting with leaders from Nordic and Baltic states.
As we were discussing last night, I don't think we've seen anything like it in Europe for 80 years. And you know what I mean. We're seeing the bombardment of innocent civilians from the air, ruthless, systematic use of artillery against centres of population. And our hearts, I think the hearts of the whole world, go out to the people of Ukraine.
They were joined by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who told the meeting via video link that they must send more weapons.
So we all are the targets of Russia, and everything will go against Europe if Ukraine won't stand. So I would like to ask you to help yourself by helping us. You know the kind of weapon we need, everyone knows. You know what kind of defense measures we need. You know what that our need is, the fighter jets, and without your support it would be very difficult.
Meanwhile, the International Court of Justice will deliver its order on Wednesday in the case concerning allegations of genocide under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in Ukraine. Kylie Kumalo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Let's stay with the Ukraine-Russia conflict. We're now joined by the South African Communist Party's first Deputy Secretary, Mr. Solly Mapaila. Mr. Mapaila, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. Please, if you will allow me, we'll get to Ukraine in just a moment. We've just seen a statement this afternoon. Parliament says it's going ahead with the impeachment process against the public protector, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane. I wonder what is the response of the SACP in this matter?
Well, we have said in the past that conduct at some point left much to be desired, in a sense that she was pursuing political agendas and nitpicking on individuals that she thought were vulnerable for factional battles, largely in the ANC. And I think that this is the outcome when people disregard the law and the rule of law. So we are happy that Parliament has finally reached this conclusion. They must put this matter to end.
All right, thank you so much for that. And now let's go to this Ukraine conflict. I mean, the South African Communist Party, which you're part of, has strong relations with Russia. I mean, with so many leaders of the Tripartite Alliance receiving military training in the Soviet Union. I wonder what is your reaction as the Communist Party to the current situation that is unfolding in Ukraine as we see the escalations?
We had very strong relations with the Soviet Union, not with Russia. but we have no condemnation of existing Russia. We maintain good relations with the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, with the government of Russia, and we think they have embraced a lot of things from the Soviet era, which were epoch-making in the development of humankind. But as it relates to the current war or the military operation in Ukraine, we want to start by affirming the fact that the SACP stands for peace, and it's against war and the destruction of life. At the same time, we appreciate that Russia has been hugely provoked by European Union, the USA and NATO group aggression, the triangle of aggression, which seeks to expand its military presence in Eastern Europe, which is the countries or the areas that are governing, that are bordering Russia, which were former member states of the Soviet Union. And it is in that regard that you will note that during the USSR period, the Soviet Union had a lot of nuclear weapons, particularly in its bordering states with the European Union, which were defense deterrent. The European Union countries still possesses nuclear weapons, some of them, including the major powers like Britain and so forth. All of those countries that are called 5 members of the permanent powers of the Security Council possesses huge capacity for nuclear warfare, France and so forth. And now their expansion to encircle Russia actually is detrimental to Russian security. And these concerns were raised openly over the last 3 decades with these countries, but they have ignored those. And we have seen their escalation of setting up bases in countries like Poland, putting up military air missile defense facing Russia. This is a direct provocation. And when they went to take over Ukraine, particularly bringing in a coup, because now this coup is not talked about. It was a military takeover that put this current government, which later banned even organizations like the Communist Party. It can't exist there. I don't know what Europe is defending when it or even the US, which prides itself on. But that country that does not even allow free political activity was held by the USA and the European Union in what they call the Orange Revolution. And in 2014, we saw when Russia couldn't take it and therefore decided to take back Crimea, which has been always part and parcel of the Russian Federation, including Ukraine, by the way. Yes. But nonetheless, this situation now where it is, we think we need peace. The European Union and NATO must give concrete affirmations that there will be no military expansion in the Eastern European blocs, and therefore there won't be a war. And also, if they affirm that they will not accept Ukraine as part of the NATO, there will be no war tomorrow. It's as simple as that. And this reason why there is a war is precisely because they rejected this request by Russia.
And Mr. Mapaila, looking at and listening to what you're saying, and of course there have been these concerns around the expansion as a threat of security of Russia, as you say, but does it justify the raging conflict that we continue to see in that country? I mean, women and children are being killed and there's a complete destruction of a country.
No, that's the mission of propaganda, to use that. Because today, the Western media has not been reporting about the constant bombardment by Ukraine of the Donbas region, where they've killed thousands and thousands of people. They also do not talk about the constant bombardment of different countries in the world held by the European Union, militarily armed by the USA, like the continuous bombardment of Syria by Israel, supported by the Americans, their constant attack on Palestine, supported by military hardware of the USA, their continued untold misery inflicted on countries like Cuba through 50-year blockade on Cuban economy, now on Venezuela, on Nicaragua, on Bolivia, and other parts of the world. So the issue is that if you were to compare even the support that they give, for instance, to the Saudi Arabian government and their continued inflicting on war in Yemen, and look at the suffering of women and children in those countries for decades, this is not comparable. But nonetheless, any human misery and suffering is condemnable. It should not actually take place, particularly to perpetuate the interest of political leaders of the European Union and the USA because of their imperialist aggression and the need for domination of the world.
And Mr.
President
Mapaila,
Putin,
pardon me, I'm so sorry about that. Please forgive me. We're almost out of time. Very briefly, I mean, given your closeness with the Soviet Union, have you been able to also engage with some of your Russian counterparts in an attempt to try and see if you can reach a solution here?
the Soviet Union doesn't exist. It's the Russian Federation.
I know it doesn't exist, but I'm talking about given your history with the Soviet Union and given the fact that right now there's your counterparts in Russia who are also leading that Federation of Communists. Have you been in touch with your counterparts currently now who can maybe to look at whether or not there might be a solution on the table?
Yes, we've been discussing with them. In fact, this matter was on the agenda of the International Communist and Workers' Parties last 2 weeks ago in Portugal to discuss even the war. But all of us agree that the imperialist aggression must stop, and President Putin has done the best for the world and stood up to the bullies of the US and European Union imperialism using the NATO military arm. So therefore, this action that he has taken, it's important, but we continue to say we need peace, we need to stop the war. But nonetheless, if Europe continues, like America continues to supply Ukraine with military hardware, that is weapons and other things, there's no prospect for stopping the war. But we have called for peace in the region.
All right, Mr. Mapaila, thank you so much for your time and for even indulging us on the developing story at the beginning of this conversation. That was Solly Mapaila. He is the first Deputy Secretary of the SACP.